so now that we're able to make some changes to how the ball is moving, the next thing we need to do is make it so that if our ball goes off the side, just like that, our game can be reset. Because at the moment what's happening is our ball goes off the side, and that's not very interesting. Suddenly there's nothing our players can do. So what we're going to do this, we're going to create some kind of zones at either end that can be used to recognize when the ball has now gone to the left or to the right of our paddle players. So we're going to create a new object, create an empty object. I'm going to rename this to be goal, like that. You can see now it's by default it's put in position here. So I'm going to click and drag this over to the side here. We're going to apply a box collider to it. So we're going to make it a box collider 2D. And I'm going to drag this up on the Y scale so that it makes it nice and big. And I'm going to move it into position so that it's behind the player like that. So now at the moment, this is a box like we've created before. And if our little tennis ball was to bounce against it, it would just bounce off and go flying back the way it had come, which obviously isn't what we wanted to do. So we're going to make it a trigger like this, so that now it basically acts as an activation zone. So if the ball enters this zone, then we'll be able to do some scripting with this that will allow us to activate some things and make some things happen. So basically what we'll want it to do is when the ball enters this zone, we're going to reset the ball back to its starting position. So we have this goal here, and we know that our ball will be able to enter it and we'll be able to do some stuff in script. But to be able to know that we've entered a particular area, we want to apply a tag to this goal. So we haven't looked at tags previously, but tags are basically ways of identifying objects within the world. So we're going to go to tag here in the inspector for our goal, and we're going to add a new tag. We're going to hit the little plus symbol, and we're going to create a tag called goal zone. And we're going to go back to the goal here, and we're going to give it that tag. So now that we know that our goals here will have a certain a certain way of being identified when the ball enters the area. Because basically what we can do is check if this object that we've entered has the tag goal zone. So we have one goal here on the left. Let's duplicate this and pop it over here on the right, like that, just the way we want. And then we're going to go into our scripts folder, and we're going to open our ball controller script. So within our ball controller script, what we're going to do is, much like we did on our paddle controller script when we checked for on collision exit, which was to check and see if the ball had stopped hitting against the paddle, what we're going to use is a new function down here called void on trigger enter 2D. And then we're going to say collider 2D other. So on trigger enter 2D is basically the same as on collision enter 2D or on collision exit 2D that we used previously, except on our goal we set that to be a trigger so that we know it's a zone that our ball can now pass through. It won't be physically obstructed by this area here. So what we can do is check, and we're basically saying, okay, our ball has now entered into a trigger zone. So something has happened where our ball has joined into this zone here. So what we need to do is, okay, our ball has entered this zone, has entered a zone. We need to see what kind of zone this is. So the way we can identify that it is one of the goals, we can say if the other object that we just ran into, we can get the tag on that, and we can check if it is equal to our goal zone. Now, a couple of things here we want to do before we go any further. When we're checking a tag, we need to make sure it's spelled the exact same as what it has been previously as it is over here. And we need to make sure also that the capital letters are the exact same as they are here too. Because if they aren't the exact same, then it's going to give us a huge error that we won't be able to use at all. And the other thing is that when we're checking to see if something is equal to something else, we always want to use two equal symbols. Because within Unity, when we have one equal symbol here, that means you're setting something to be equal to something else. But when you want to check if something is equal to something else, you want to use two equal symbols like that. So we're checking to see if our tag is equal to the goal zone. And if it is, then we know we've entered the area where we need to reset our position. So how do we know which position we should reset to? So if we enter into this goal zone here on the left, for example, what we'll want to do is reset our position so that so say if we've entered this area here, that means that this guy has scored a point, so he gets to serve again, is how the basic logic of this game is going to go. So if we've entered this area, then we need to reset our position so the ball is now launching from just in front of this paddle. And then if we enter the other one over here, then our ball is being reset back to the position of this paddle. So if we're going to use the positions of these paddles, then we need to know where these objects are in relation to the ball. So we're going to create a reference to both of these objects within the world. So if we go into our ball controller script, we're going to create a new reference up here. We're going to say public game object, and we're going to call it paddle 1. And we're going to do the exact same just below it, and we're going to say public game object paddle 2. So those will be our two paddles. And if we save this and go back into Unity here, what we can do now is go to our ball, and once it finishes compiling, be able to scroll down here. So now we have two empty slots here for our two paddles. So we're going to drag our first paddle into paddle 1 and our second paddle into paddle 2. So we've got our two paddles now. So now we know that we can reset our ball to be somewhere near where our paddles are. But how do we know if we've entered into a zone on the left or a zone on the right? What we could do is on our goals, for example, we could add a tag for goal zone left and goal zone right, and then do a check back in here to see which tag does this have. Or within this tag here, what we can do is say if transform dot position dot x, so that is the x position of the ball. If our x position of our ball is less than 0, then we know that we must be on the left hand side of the screen. Therefore we've definitely entered the goal zone on the left hand side. So if we've entered the goal zone on the left hand side, then we should reset our position to be on the paddle on the right hand side. So that'll be transform dot position. We're resetting our transform position. I don't know why it put transform twice there, but transform dot position. We want to reset the position of the ball to be equal to whatever our paddle 2 dot transform dot position is. But we don't want to just go exactly in the middle of the paddle's position, because what will happen then is our ball will spawn in the middle of this paddle, which is obviously not very good. So we'll offset it slightly by saying our paddle 2 dot transform dot position plus a new vector tree, because we're dealing with transform positions, so we have to remember that it will always be a 3 number value, so to have an x and a y and a z value. And what we're going to say is just set this so that it is at minus 1f, and 1f just means it's a float value, so we're saying it'll be at position minus 1 from wherever our current paddle position is on the x-axis, and we don't want to make any change to where it is on the y-axis or any change to where it is on the z-axis. So basically what we're saying is, okay, if our ball enters the goal zone on the left, reset it so that it's back at the paddle on the right, but just slightly to the left of the paddle on the right. So that'll reset the position of the ball, but let's also reset the speed that it's moving at. So now in our start function up here, we'll remember that we set the rigid body velocity to be equal to the start force up here. So what we're going to do is just copy the same line of code, and we can pop it in down here, and instead of it making it move to the right at a speed of 5 and up at a speed of 5, when we're starting on the right hand side, instead we're going to make it move to the left by making it move at minus start force, and we're going to make it move down by making it minus start force also. And that's basically all we have to do for resetting the value. We'll do the exact same thing for when our script is moving, or when our ball gets reset on the other side. But before we do that, we're going to check and make sure that this bit of code actually works the way we intended to. So we're going to let it compile, and once it's finished compiling, we're hopefully I'll manage to bounce the ball back and we'll get it into this goal zone here. So we're going to hit play. Let the balls fly around, and we'll let that bounce over there. Well, it didn't help that I managed to leave my paddle above the screen, so of course I managed to mess it up at just the wrong moment. Let's try this one more time. Okay, let the paddles bounce over there. Keep that paddle here, and there we go. We see our ball gets reset back to its first position. And you can see if we move the paddle down, the ball moves with the paddle as it's moving, and that's perfect. That's just what we wanted to do. So let's do the exact same thing for the other paddle now. So instead of it being at transform.position.x is less than 0, we can say, okay, if that's not true, then else. There's only one other option. Either our position is less than x and we're in the goal zone on the left, or otherwise we must be in the goal zone on the right, because there's only 2 possible goal zones. So we'll copy this whole same bit of code here, and we're going to paste it in there and make a couple of changes. So instead of going to paddle 2's position, we'll go to paddle 1's, and instead of being slightly to the left, we'll make it slightly to the right of the paddle, and then we need to apply start force in the positive on the x-axis and positive on the y-axis. So now we'll save that, go back in here and test and make sure that's working. Hit play, and we'll see our ball gets reset back every single time and just keeps bouncing. So now we have our game, the basic kind of functionality of the game working. So let's make it a little bit more interesting and start adding some score so we can keep track of who's actually doing well at the game itself.